consulting team. We are the consulting team for the project. The goal for today's meeting is twofold. One is to introduce to you, or in many cases, remind you that the governance study is underway. It kicked off in September with the first of what will be three public meetings, along with over 20 community service provider meetings. The second reason for today's meeting is to present to you, the community, the findings from those meetings and a bunch of research that's been going on with the technical team. The agenda for today is flexibility. We're allotted until 1 o'clock. It's 12:09 right now. The meeting is being recorded. I will be taking notes that will get folded into the final report from all three Tuesday series. If you haven't signed in yet already, please do. And if we get your email, we're going to subscribe you to our monthly newsletter. Dylan and Leanne will each speak for 10 minutes. When that's complete, then we'll go into the community conversation. We'll open it up and it's an interactive conversation with you. The main objective for today and the entire Tuesday series is to hear from you. It's really important to the study, to the consulting team, to the community that we hear from you, we get questions out, we get you thinking, you get us thinking, and we understand more about each other. With that, are there any questions? Okay, we'll take it away with Dylan. He's got 10 minutes. Dylan, please give us a brief intro of yourself, and if you would tell us one thing that you've learned about Big Sky that has surprised you.
Yeah, let's share screen and get the slideshow up. So I'm Dylan Pipinich. I'm a land planner at WGM Group. A little bit of history with me. I've worked for WGM Group for about a year. Prior to that, I was a city planner for Butte Silver Bow. So my background is municipal city planning. That's where my understanding is and where I'm coming from. Prior to that, I was born and raised in Anaconda. I live in Butte now, educated in Bozeman. I'm a Bobcat. 10-0. Yeah, Big Sky put me through college. I worked construction in the Yellowstone Club. That funded my college. That took a little bit longer than it probably should have, but it was fun. And I had a good time up here. And then I have a master's degree from Montana Tech. And Meg's little segue thing and the things that surprised you about Big Sky is how much Big Sky has changed when I was working up here in 2000 to 2005, probably 25 years ago. How much it's changed and how much it's stayed the same at the same time. And that's a kind of weird thing to say, but you guys have definitely grown and changed a lot. But that community drive and the ability to kind of get things done and prosper is still the same as it was. It was an economic engine back then. There was, like I said, put me through college, and most everybody that I associated with kind of funded their college. Bozeman was an expensive place to live back then too, and construction helped me live there and be educated there. And if it wasn't for Big Sky, I probably wouldn't be standing here, be doing something completely different. Probably still be working construction somewhere. So that's kind of what I know. Rolling into, oh, we can hide this. There we go. Kind of where we're at in the study. So the first step and the first things we've been doing is reaching out to people and trying to understand how Big Sky lives and operates. And that's been quite the interesting task. It's a very, very complicated place to live and complicated place to operate, and it's been amazing the things that you've accomplished there. So that was kind of step number one, is this existing conditions. How does Big Sky what is Big Sky, who is Big Sky, and how does it operate? And we're still detailing that. Moving on to the next kind of phase is what we're starting here, that's coming up is we have this big question, the main question of governance in Big Sky, and what options are available. Is there a better path? Are we doing good as it is? Are we missing opportunities? Can we create more opportunities? That's this big question is around governance. And as land planners, it's an interesting question to have and a very unique type of question, because we are typically solving problems that have a known outcome. You have a desired outcome. We write a plan that's like, say it's a affordable housing plan, and you have this desired outcome of affordable housing. So you kind of take the answer to your problems and reverse engineer it through policy and through government changes and things like that to get this desired outcome. This type of question is, there isn't a known outcome. It's planners are used to doing things where the outcome dictates the process, and you figure out how to navigate something to get to a desired outcome. And this is the exact opposite. This question is, the process needs to dictate the outcome. And that's where scenario planning comes in. So in order to get detailed answers for those big picture questions, such as governance and boundary and things like that, that kind of the process dictating the outcome is what planners use scenario planning for. And we've been talking about this on all of the Tuesday series, and that's really the going to be the next step coming up for community engagement, is how to develop those scenarios, meaningful scenarios that answer questions for people. But that is the process and the framework that's available to kind of work towards an unknown outcome when you don't have a preconceived idea of what is best. And how we do that is kind of on the screen here. So you identify some influential factors, such as technical feasibility, economic possibilities, political viability, all those things that are on the screen. And you mix that really with community values to see what's important and try to rank what's important compared to other things, and try to get a list of what the real community goals and objectives are. And that's how we develop these scenarios. So the goal is to start with a very broad range of scenarios, and using the community outreach and the community goals and objectives and all the conversations that we're having for everybody, narrow it down to 3 scenarios that will be able to inform everybody based on their own opinions. So we're going to develop those scenarios and create those stories. So the way that you can get detailed answers from such a vague question of governance is to put detail in the question. So that's what we're doing with the community outreach, to understand goals and objectives and put that detail in that question. So those scenarios will be very specific, down to what services would be provided by whom and where and how that would all work. And they're very detailed scenarios. And then we can give detailed answers of how much is that going to cost? Who's going to pay for that? What does that mean from a standpoint of representation in government, right? There's a couple arms of government. One is government provides services and they levy taxes to pay for those services, and that's a community benefit. And then the other arm, which is a lot less quantifiable from a numbers perspective, is level of representation, or a level of accountability in government, that elected official, that democracy feel, and there's people that are elected that are held accountable by the voting public. And that's that representation aspect. So each one of these scenarios is going to have a service level and a representation level, and we'll be able to quantify what that means for folks in both of those. Sorry, I'm kind of jockeying everybody around here. And then the main goal is to take those scenarios and present the facts for what this scenario means for the community. and down to that detailed level so we get those detailed answers so people can make informed decisions of how they want to move forward. And there's not going to be any recommendations or any like, WGM feels that you should do this type of government or anything, because it's really a community decision, and it's going to be a vote, and it's going to be up to you. But as long as you're informed in making that decision, then you should. Our goal is to help you make the right one. You decide what that is. So kind of some next steps. And when we were really struggling with that, like I've mentioned several times, you get this broad question and we need to add detail to that question to get some detailed answers. It's because all these potential outcomes from changes or staying the same or just what's going to happen in the future is also interrelated and interconnected to each other. So we've got like this puzzle piece visual of all these different influencing factors. And as one grows or changes, then all the other pieces have to change. So it's really hard to detail, like this is an absolute outcome of this when you have all these moving pieces. So the scenario locks all those pieces together and they're defined, and then we can provide some answers for that. The key to all of this is for our team to be able to identify the right scenarios that resonate with the community. So that's the reasoning for the extensive outreach is, my opinion doesn't really matter. I'm not a voter in Big Sky. It's you guys all that need to decide. So we need to come up with some scenarios that resonate and understand with the community so that they can make those decisions. Because if we just pick something from left field, then you're not going to really get any benefit from it. Kind of a little exercise that we've been doing in these sessions is density. So there's a Montana code requirement for municipalities to have a certain amount of density. And that is a requirement of 200 people per square mile. And the way that the team is looking at this is a little bit different. That is what I would call a legislative checkbox right now. As Montana code is, you have to have 200 people per square mile to be an incorporated municipality. Does that mean if you have 201 people per square mile that you should be in a municipality?
Trying to go through emails while I'm sitting in on this other meeting.
That's Sarah, I'll tell her to hush it.
All right.
If I can mute it. Anyway,
Does that mean 200 per square mile or an average of 200?
it means across the municipal boundary. So if you took a big boundary, you would average all the people
So it's an
and
average.
so if, like, say we look at a boundary of the resort down the canyon and there's 3,500 people in there and there's this X many square miles, then you have this many people per square mile. But the team's really diving into, what's important is legislative intent. So why is that a thing? Why is there a Montana code checkbox that says you need 200 people per square mile? So the intent of that from a big picture seems to be that municipalities need to be able to provide efficient services. And they picked this 200 number, like you need this kind of density that we think is so we don't set a municipality up for failure, right? That you're not going to have the residents to cover the cost of the services, and just a basic understanding of how services are delivered. It's a real big thing in land planning now. It's like infill development and reduced sprawl. We had this type of land strategy, especially in the 90s, that's like everybody wanted 20 acres and you wanted to live out. And so now we have miles of road to service every residence, a lot of maintenance costs, and delivering cost of services over a broad range is really expensive compared to a denser requirement. So the goal for that is and it's the same as there's a checkbox for the county size and how much developable ground is, so that you're not setting a municipality up for failure, that you'll be able to efficiently provide services at a cost that residents thing. The benefit that we're having with this study is we're doing that fiscal analysis to tell you how much it's gonna cost with some selected services. And using that 200 as a guideline, knowing that if a scenario where a boundary is less dense than that would require a legislative change. Laws can be changed, it's possible. So we're not taking that out, and Meg's telling me to wrap it up, so I'm gonna talk a little bit faster. We can talk about more about that in the question and answer period. But there's a risk with that legislative change, right? So those, we're looking at the reasons for those types of municipal check boxes. And goes the other way around too, that if we draw a boundary that has 205 people per square mile, you don't need a legislative change, but it still might be cost prohibitive to provide those services depending on, because you're right, it's an average, right? You might have a real dense group of people here, then you're trying to serve somebody 5 miles away. You still need to take care of all those roads and that infrastructure and stuff like that. And then compound that all on top of how services are provided existing, how they're doing it right now, and you get a real complicated math problem that we're hoping to simplify for folks in that final report. So that's just kind of one thing that we're thinking about with scenarios. There's really 2 main questions and then a bunch of side decisions in the scenario. One is governance structure, whether that's incorporation or moving a county line or creating a county or doing nothing and creating districts. There's a whole list of tools in the toolkit for that. And then there's this whole list of, you could draw a boundary wherever you want to analyze, right? But then we gotta tie that into what is Big Sky, what do people feel is Big Sky, and then the fiscal part of what can be efficiently provided services and what services are those providing, to see what kind of boundary makes sense. And then the level of services and everything like that is just kind of the icing on the cake to developing the scenario. But boundaries really something to think about. So I'm gonna pass it off to Leanne, who's gonna do a little bit of talking about the fiscal side of things, and then we'll dive into the questions.
And Leanne, we're gonna have you give a brief introduction of yourself and one thing that has surprised you about Big Sky that you've learned.
Sure. Do you all have my slides in there too, or do you want me to share my screen?
I'm sharing your slide right now. Just tell me when you want me to switch. We're on the district one.
Okay, I think there's a little bit of a delay on the slide change online, but I'll roll with it. Hi everyone, I'm Leanne Ryan. I'm a senior project manager at Echo Northwest. There it is. We're a public policy research firm based out of the Pacific Northwest, and I work in our Seattle office. I've been helping kind of lead a lot of our urban systems work, which is one of our main practice areas. So mostly working with different types of governments on the intersection of economic development, land use, and really housing has been kind of like my main bucket of work. And before I moved into the policy world, I kind of worked in residential and commercial development, but my education is mostly in architecture and planning. So I look at things through a lot of different lenses, for better or worse. So Echo is primarily leading the fiscal impact analysis in partnership with Sarah Emmons. You may have met her. If I can't see everyone's faces in the room, but some of you may have met her along the way. If you've been at multiple meetings, she's in Olympia, Washington. But today we'll just kind of run through, I know we're running short on time, but we'll just kind of run through where we are in the analysis and kind of how it's setting up the next batch of work. You can go, well, actually stay on the slide. So one of our first major efforts was untangling the property tax landscape and understanding how the resort tax functions and kind of where it goes. So since we're outsiders, we needed to better understand the layers of service districts to see how Big Sky fits into this broader framework in both counties. So looking at Big Sky's role in driving the taxable value in both counties and how that relates to the distribution of public services. This was really helpful in this map exercise that we did, was really helpful in wrangling that property tax so we kind of understand where the overlap is happening. It's taken some time to track down numbers and documents from both counties. It's a busy time of year for them, so especially this year. So I think we're on the other side of that, and I think we'll be ready to share some numbers pretty soon. But we don't have numbers we're comfortable going public with just yet. And then you can go ahead and go back to the resort tax slide or the next slide. So then we zoomed in on the resort tax, and we've spent quite a bit of time understanding the different types of agencies, nonprofits, districts, and the different types of projects that the resort tax funds, and sort of the important role it plays in the community in helping understand or helping fund those essential public entities, organizations that kind of serve public-like functions, and the different nonprofits that do a lot of great work related to conservation, education, mental health, housing. So a lot of those functions that you might see in some of the larger government structures. During that sorting exercise, we discovered that support for public entities, so your wastewater, sewer district, all that kind of stuff, has tripled since fiscal year 2021. Nonprofit funding has grown by 31%, and that the organizations that serve those public-like functions, like the housing and the kind of mental health services, has more than doubled. You can go to the next slide. So who falls into those categories that we've created? Public services are fairly easy: water, sewer districts, the sheriff, the school district, transportation, fire. Those are all things that I think generally most people consider public services. And then there are the nonprofits, so that's the chamber, Visit Big Sky, the food bank, some of the recreation organizations, and some of the arts programming. And then there's sort of this public-like function category, and that's maybe the library, the housing trust, Big Sky Community Organization, which functions similarly to what we typically see as a parks department, mental health services, and early child care and education. And this public function is one of our most interesting categories to think about as you sort of look towards a change in governance. So what types of services would you want to see publicly funded in your community? And what are some of the trade-offs of doing that? And the next slide. So the existing conditions work has been really helpful. I'm going to make up some of our time here. Has been really helpful in helping us think about what the scenarios might look like and how a change in governance relates to that service provider landscape specifically. It raised some really, really interesting questions around community values, which Dylan touched upon. And so it's a really important dimension to this study. And we know that there are going to be limitations to what's currently possible, that need a lot of investigation and analysis, state statute, fiscal constraints that will affect both Big Sky and the counties that it crosses. And then there will be potential impacts to some of those existing service providers as well. So we'll be looking into all of that. And then if you want to just go to the last slide, I'll kind of quickly wrap up so we can chat as a group. These are some of the questions that we've come up with early on to help guide the fiscal work. There are a lot of big questions to answer, and I know we're all kind of a bunch of nerds, so we're really excited to help you answer them. But even just going through our initial list of evaluation criteria this morning as a consultant team, we had like almost 15 unique dimensions just based on our kind of collective knowledge as a group and what we've been hearing from the community. So we'll be working on narrowing a lot of that down. Just know that we're looking at this from a lot of different angles, and the community is actively shaping this process by engaging in these meetings. So we appreciate your help throughout the process. I'm going to stop talking so we can talk as a group. But yeah, we'll be unveiling some of the existing conditions numbers from the fiscal perspective pretty soon.
Thank you, Leanne, and she did put us at 12:33. We want to be conscientious of 1 o'clock. We will stay after if we need to. Let's open it up. Who would like to ask the first question, or we can prompt a question or two?
I got a question. So I'm just going back to the whole population density thing, and using that to help plan for for Big Sky, like, how do you? I'm sure you guys have thought about it, but how do you address the fluctuations in population between busy season and off season? Like, how are we planning for? Like, are you planning for the people that live here, or are you planning for the height of busy season when every bathroom is being used and all the electrical outlets are being used and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the way that, Leon can maybe speak to this too, the way that we're looking at it is, you would take that scenario of whatever service that the government's providing and what it is existing. We're gonna look into the future for future growth and stuff like that, because a big component of this is we want to make sure that whatever, if anything is changed, that's just chosen is sustainable. You know what I mean? So, yeah, for that example, you know, we would be going off the numbers of the water and sewer district of what they see, how they, you know, the money that they need to function. So in September, when we first started meeting with those groups, we met one-on-one with all of we call them community service providers, to understand their budget and where that money's coming from and how they're spending it. So that we can kind of relate apples to apples, you know, if something were in a scenario to change that. Does that make sense? It kind of
Sure, yeah.
kind of dances around your question. A thing to clarify is that when you're talking about that representative side of government, you're talking registered voters, permanent residents. And when you're talking about services that you need to provide, you're talking about existing community services that's, you know, planned for peak use most of the time. So you get that voter, and then it's all based on property taxes and things like that. So it would be a mill levy, you know, a percentage of each property would have to pay property taxes to fund whatever level of service will be planned to be provided.
Going back to your density comments earlier. How do we count density? Are we gonna count density of residents only that are registered to vote? Or are we gonna count density based on probable population, Christmas week to New Year's? Two very different numbers.
Yeah, so the way that Montana statute reads is permanent occupants, so you don't have to be registered to vote, you would count, you know, anybody under the age of 18. It would be a Big Sky resident, and it'd be the same way. So if you were to go down that road, you would need to take a census. We're looking right now at the 2020 census data because that's the best available, knowing that there's changes since 2020, and really probably the most inopportune time to take a census in the country was April 1, 2020. We understand that that's also the best available data, but if you were to go down that route, say Big Sky voted to incorporate, step number one is to take a census, a door-to-door census. Permanent residents live, and that density requirement is a permanent resident, not necessarily 18 or above, but permanent resident.
So second homeowners. Or not, so like.
In the density requirement, correct. Yep, so you're touching on the whole aspect of why resort tax is the thing, right? Because you have resort areas and you have communities that have to be able to sustain services for numbers of people that is significantly larger than their permanent residents. And that's why resort tax is a thing. That's why you get to tax those things, you know, the 3% and the 1% for infrastructure. It's a way for communities to make up and to be able to provide services for people that don't live there. Because your economy is based on.
Has any community ever challenged the density requirement in Montana?
Not to my knowledge, most communities were that was, you know, the Constitution was in 1977. Most communities incorporated in the 1800s, early 1900s. There's been and I don't know if it's from the narrative coming out of Big Sky, but all of a sudden, like Sealy Lake is mentioned, incorporate and Lolo and other places up in the Flathead. I don't know if you guys are starting a trend or what's going on here, but those types of laws, that number hasn't been adjusted since the 1977. Colstrip was the last one incorporated 20 years ago. They met that density requirement, so not to my knowledge.
If Big Sky were incorporated, can we keep the resort tax in place as well? Or if you're incorporated as a municipality, do you lose that standing?
West Yellowstone. So West Yellowstone is rated for resort tax and goes right to their city.
Red Lodge.
Mhm. Yeah, Red Lodge Mountain, that's probably the most applicable one. So the resort tax here is operated like a district. Another incorporation or another government structure, you can create a district for just about everything, levy taxes for it, provide a service for it, just like a local government. That's what you are, how you're governed right now, is you're a conglomeration of a bunch of districts. You got a fire district, you know, parks district, like you have all these districts to levy taxes, right? That's basically the same thing that a local government would do, and that's what resort tax is doing. Most of the other resort tax communities were incorporated before they implemented resort tax because they're 100 years old. So the municipality made resort tax, they established resort tax, and they have it in their municipal code of this is what we're spending the money on. In this case, resort tax would be a larger area, most likely, than a municipal government. And I think the difficulty there would be to make sure you're not doing double taxation from anybody, because you have a different entity levying taxes. But that happens all the time. You have districts all the time that levy taxes on a school district is separate from the local government, and they levy taxes. It's just, you know, in my mind, it wouldn't be the same. I'm not an attorney by any means, but it's something that's, you would be the first to incorporate after resort tax, not have a municipal government establish resort tax.
So here's an end goal for you. What do we need to change in order to keep more money in Big Sky to pay for our capital improvements?
That's a good question. Yeah, because you have a capital improvements plan that if you add everything up, including all the services, you $700 million, which is a not meaning to giggle when I say that, but that's an overwhelming number for 3,500 residents.
So that's your end goal.
Yeah, that's definitely, you know, when we're adding the things up of community values to dictate scenarios, we've heard that more than once. We've definitely established the concern of the taxable value that comes out of Big Sky and who gets what where and how those, what bang for your buck that you're getting and things like that. So yeah, those are definitely things that are guiding that scenario development.
Tell us what those property tax questions were. They were covered. Thank you.
Sorry.
It's gonna be pretty important. How you gonna figure out that boundary?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, there's an unlimited amount of options, right? Yeah, so the way you figure out any problem like that is you have to identify what is really important to you, and you use those criteria to narrow it down. And then what's gonna be helpful for the public is to understand some general outcomes of that. You know what I mean? Like, here's a boundary, here's some general outcomes. We're not saying that this is what's gonna be in the report, but just so you know, like, this is where people are, like that boundary map, you draw a boundary here. And that's kind of what that means, to help guide some educated decision making in the community so that you can help us get to what really matters to you.
So then that boundary, if the town incorporated, that boundary would still be able to split two counties. And none of that becomes a problem as far as how Big Sky's kind of set up with Madison up top and Gallatin down below.
Yeah, so not at the risk of getting too deep into the weeds. There's a thing called statutory construction, and that's how you write legislative bills and how you write legislative code. And it's a thing that lawyers do, and I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that, right? And people think that Montana code is a lot more prescriptive than it is. Like, there's not a bullet list that says thou shalt not cross county lines. Like, that's not in there, right? It's all based on the intent. There's an attorney general's opinion out there that you can cross county lines with the municipality. The annexation part, you are allowed to annex portions of other counties into your municipality, but it doesn't specifically say, you know, you can do this. That would be an exhaustive list in the Montana code to list all the things that a municipality could possibly ever do. And that's not how it's written. That's why you have things like lawyers and attorney generals, and they make opinions. And that's why attorney general's opinions are called just that. They're an opinion based on law, and they look at what the legislative intent was and how the statutory construction happened and all. Like, that's I'm really sorry I'm getting down into this legal weeds, but those are the things that like we're taking into consideration. We have an attorney general's opinion that at that time, that was the attorney general's thought that you could.
And
Does that
aren't
make
there
sense?
towns that cross county lines currently?
Yeah, definitely out of Montana, it happens all the time, right? Like everything's grown together, especially like Leanne can talk a lot of it. You leave towns and enter towns, left an urban area, right? Like that's just how things have built out there, but generally speaking, we'll give you attorney general's opinion. Says, you know, do with it what you will, kind of thing.
And Leanne, you want to chime in here on this?
Yeah, I'm having, Dylan, you were breaking up, so I don't know if you're like moving away from the microphone. I can't see you, but so I didn't catch the tail of that. But I just wanted to, Philip put something really, a good question in the chat that I wanted to maybe talk about out loud.
Yeah, please do. We can't see the chat.
Okay, here, I'll read it. You mentioned that we have a combination of HOAs, nonprofits, districts, et cetera, that currently provide public services. Have you been able to identify services that are not currently being provided? Two that come to mind for me are a building department and a police department. Have you identified or will you identify any other areas that are lacking? Likewise, have you or will you identify any duplicated service areas that are currently less efficient than they could be? The answer is yes to all of that. We were just talking this morning about the range of services that are sort of on the table. And one of the things that we'll be thinking about is what services each scenario might provide. And police, building department, planning department, fire are all on the table. And then there will be, you know, scenarios where maybe some of those existing service districts continue to exist as they do, and the city provides other services. That kind of stuff will all sort of be baked into the scenarios that we end up running. And we are hoping to let the community drive that conversation around the types of services that they would like to see their community provide collectively. Hopefully that answers your question to some degree. And we'll also be looking at what the impact, I think I said this in the presentation, what the impact to those service providers that are currently providing services to Big Sky, because they collect property tax from Big Sky. So what if they are no longer collecting that property tax, and what does it mean for them as well? Did that come through? No, now I don't hear you.
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
sorry, they're all thinking about it.
Even thought.
Chat questions or people?
Those are, yeah, that's on my computer.
Oh, okay.
Sorry for the conglomeration of technical devices.
I have one.
Yes.
Jack with Explore Big Sky. Question is that there's been discussions about incorporation in the past here, and from my understanding, I was not here for those discussions, but there have been sticking points and sort of hurdles that were insurmountable that stopped the discussions. Have you guys been researching those challenges? I know you brought up liquor licenses as one at an earlier event. I've heard of the liquor license issue. Are there other issues that have been researched and that you guys are exploring? Like, will they be a stopping point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm gonna talk a little louder because it's over towards me. Yeah, we're well aware of the history. One thing that we're doing prior to getting the community down the scenario planning is this, call it a summary report. It's the existing conditions. It's the existing fiscal analysis. It's Montana code review of all the things you can and can't do. And that's going to be a really informative lengthy, if you want it to be lengthy type of document where we really dive into the nuts and bolts of this is kind of how it affects. But those specific questions, like you know, like the liquor license thing, or like part of the community outreach is we want to get all those details to make sure that we don't miss those in the scenario planning aspect of things. And the other part is addressing that in like the Montana code review of this is the section of Montana code that says that you'll be, you know, held to so many liquor licenses, you won't be able to expand your liquor licenses or things like that. So just trying to detail that. I'm not gonna say that we're gonna like, the way that we're going to show it is in that scenario planning to say, in this instance, this is what this means for these types of questions, because you have to have that detailed question before you get the detailed answer. You know, you can assume that like incorporation means that you don't get any more liquor license. And it's not just liquor licenses, because things have changed since then. You know, what about like medical marijuana dispensaries or recreational, you know, and those types of things that you can tax as well. And what does that mean? Like, that's the detail that's going to be in the scenarios, and then show the outcome of that scenario, because that answer really only relates to that specific question. Kind of that picture, that interclogged thing. When you start changing things, it changes the dynamic of the whole question that you're asking. So to take that if then out of that, it's just like, this situation means this. And we're hoping to answer those questions that have definitely come up in the past, plus all the ones that are coming up in the engagement that we're doing now, because there's more.
Any other questions? Mike, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that it's overwhelming is what I'm thinking. If you move, it's Jenga.
Yeah.
You move one piece and 10 others fall out.
That's a good analogy.
Kara, what brought you here today?
Oh, I haven't been able to go to the other ones, so I wanted to get caught up on everything that was going on.
And what about this topic? Are you more concerns, or are you excited? Where are you in the world of what this means to you?
Just being in Big Sky for so long and seeing all the changes and kind of quickly changes, just knowing that this is so important to structure for sustainability moving forward. It's workforces, you know, all the services. It's important.
When we talk about values, does that mean anything to anybody, or what does the values will drive the scenarios? What does that mean to you? Hear it, anybody?
It brings up a question, whose values? Yeah, like, I mean, are we talking Long Mountain Land Company values, or the guy working the dishwasher's values? Like, there's a lot of different people pushing for a lot of different things in this town, and they don't always fit together well, so.
And how would you recommend this narrowly focused scope, this project, how we get to that, get to the bottom of that?
Well, you can go with your heart, or you can follow the money. Which one do you want to do?
I think you're doing great about contacting people and getting input from people. Talk about, that's very important to get the wide variety of opinions instead of just the few.
Thank you, Linda. What we can, this is a good place to talk about next steps and how we're gonna continue this important piece of engagement. And we know that there are so many different demographics and different values of the community, and how are we touching them all? This has been a really great exercise in being in a nice cozy room where we can have a conversation, and then we take that and we put that in with the rest of our feedback, and we will have a really hopefully all encompassing report so that you can read about it. People like Randy and Beth have been at all three of these, so they're understanding the different personalities within each engagement session. The Linda's talking about a opportunity for a virtual one-on-one where you can sign up with me and we have a set schedule, a set interview that we ask you everyone the same question. And it's really great to hear a little bit more about your personal story. I mean, Linda and Mike and I had real fun catching up on some of our old days and where they are now and what's important to them now. So please be aware that any of these one-on-one interviews are getting that much further. And I'm really trying to target, like you say, the dishwashers, the people over at Meadowview that are here year-round, full-time, that middle section. And I stand at the base lobby and I try to make people sign up. I'm not beyond begging to get you to talk to me. I'm talking to Janelle tomorrow. Thank you for signing up. And so those kinds of one-on-ones are really informative and I'm getting people saying things that they wouldn't in a public meeting. The other thing we're doing is working very closely with the chamber, where we are having industry sector conversations, construction, real estate, hospitality, and small business, and asking them, what is the most important thing to you? And then what are the 6 other really important things to you? And how can that shape the conversation and the study and give the facts to the community? In January, early January, we will be coming to town, the whole consulting team, and we'll be doing a series of workshop scenarios. We'll have things like they're working on a really cool tool where you're gonna be able to kind of serve up a buffet of what you think the governance options are and then all the services that feed into them. Please, it's not official yet, but the week of January 13th, we're gonna be in community and it's gonna be that opportunity to see how that whole puzzle piece works. We'll also be doing a forum with the chamber where we're hearing again specifically from their membership, what's important. And then at the end of January, there will be the second public meeting. And that's where we're gonna talk more about those certain scenarios. Is that right, Dylan?
Yeah, we're gonna do a robust community survey out to anybody, take a survey for a month. And really try to hone down those values so we can put some sideboards on some scenarios and kind of resonate with you. The goal in January is we were just gonna kind of roll into that and then I think everybody's starting to realize that how complicated of a question this is. So we need to catch everybody back up with a little bit of education if this is possible. This is what this might mean, so you can kind of refine what you think is important to you. And then we'll dive into that scenario development. And you know, we're the report will outline and run the fiscal analysis on 3 scenarios. And we're hoping to build those scenarios so that they resonate across that broad group of people so that one of them has some aspect of your community values in there. And we're hoping that that's going to be enough because every town has the same questions, you know, like we've done a lot of growth policies, comprehensive plans for asking people, what do you want your community to look like? And you get the same question, well, you know, who's the community, you know, because you have this broad group of people and it's probably getting a sense that that's a little bit more exacerbated than other communities here in Big Sky, but that same thing resonates with other communities. It's just like, how do I, you know, it's a compromise thing. And that's just what governance is how do you rate one person's individual opinions versus the needs and benefits of the whole community and how you define that. So we're hoping that the broad range of scenarios will resonate with everybody in this room. One of them will, to give you some answers. That's what I want. Or it's the same benefit if you look at it and be like, ooh, that's not at all what I want. So, you know, if you get those facts, then form your own opinions.
The third public meeting will be the end of March, and Jack has been super supportive of getting our message out. Please stay tuned in to Explore Big Sky, both the newspaper and the social media. And then all the other channels that we're getting the word out are through the BizRad communications, through the chamber communications, through the Housing Trust. They're including it in their newsletters. Just really help us spread the word on that. And at Leadership Big Sky last week, Megan Porter said, that everybody had a job of bringing one friend or telling one friend about it. So I'll leave that with you today, that you're challenged to tell one or two people about this so that we can get all those voices from the bottom to the top to the bottom. It is,
Your guys' help, we need to pick the right thing. You make sure.
we are at the 12:59. We didn't start till 1:09. We'll stay longer, but we know that people are busy and we can officially excuse the meeting now and we'll stick around for more questions. And here is, the website is where all this really big info is and where you can sign up for a one-on-one. The Attorney General's opinion from McGrath administration and from Bullock administration are both on the website, along with 1,000 other things, including the summary report from the September meeting. So use this as a resource, and here's a QR code if you want to take it. I'll leave it right here on this chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yay!
Thanks for jamming in.
Thanks for jamming.
Nice to meet you.
But I'm with you.
The code suggests, right?
Yeah, so you. Like, say, there's a thin area. Because you have two minutes, area, like, and now we're gonna meet that 200 per square mile.
Yeah, this one will.
In that review. it's going to be-
Probably not. I like to meet
And I would think to consider, I mean, that number's outdated.
And I think that that's going to, 3,600 people close. I think that
There's
there's.
You could draw all from. You cover the resort, meadow, town center. It's difficult, it's 146, start getting down the canyon. Or down to the canyon. Yeah, then you're probably poised for more growth in the canyon than you are in other places, you know what I mean? So.
Just based on the.
Yeah, and just, you know, if you get some services down there and some growth along the canyon, so.
But one of the questions I have is, when you go back historically to 72 or even beyond some of the opinions. Is there any indication in the legislative intent that if you get that density, any area that has that density, then we, the legislature, really think you should incorporate, you should have fundamental governance regulating the 200 people per square mile?
I haven't found anything like that.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's just the number to help people to, my opinion is what they were thinking and, you know, before I was born, was that you need to provide efficient services, right? There's one for the county too, like, if you're to create a new county, you have to have 250 square miles of developable area or something
Yeah.
like that. And a lot of it is tied to local governments are tied, they have a budgetary constraint that you can only grow your government's budget by half of the rate of inflation over the last 3 years, plus any newly taxable.
Yeah. You turn land into 5 hotels, you
Yeah.
can increase the tax.
Taxes by that, and then after that, once it's not newly construction, it can only increase that by half the rate of inflation in the last 3 years.
Okay,
So think about that, governments are subject to the full rate of inflation, nobody gives the government a deal when you're selling like a bunch of chemicals for your sewer, let's say. Right, you treatment chemicals for your sewer plant, they're not like, I'm selling it to the government, so I can only up it last year from half the rate of inflation. No,
That
that
doesn't
doesn't full
apply.
rate of inflation.
Yeah.
So that local governments are forced into this grow or not be able to fund your services, because you don't count new construction in that half rate of inflation. That's why you see local governments are always like, we need to grow our taxable value, we need to grow our taxable value, because you can't give your employees a raise of full inflation unless you do that.
Right.
You're really hamstrung that way. So these legislative boundaries are like the county one, you have to have the room to grow. Because we've structured local government so far that if you're not growing, you're not in.
Well, but then realistically, what you just said, neither Madison nor Gallatin is voluntarily going to give up the property that's here.
And they're statutorily there, you'd have to go to a vote. So if you were moving a county line and creating a county, the county that you're leaving has to vote to allow you to go. And the county that you're going to has to vote to take you. Yeah. Yeah, so there's gonna be this whole section of like viability, political or viability, or I haven't phrased the right word yet. But you could ask for the moon, you still have these challenges that take
Make
the
it
risk,
happen.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. You wanna go, okay.
So
What are you-
one, I mean, this. Doing this stuff, but just curious, with the whole population density. What happens if you get approved, the population density?
So that's actually in the law that says that it just has to be the time of the vote.
Okay,
Or
so
slow
like,
down.
even if it
still
drops
good.
low, you hit your barrier to entry and you're.
Yeah, and there's different forms of government that are statutorily bound by your population. Like there's this one, I don't think anybody has it. It's called a town meeting form, where everybody in town gets together in the gymnasium and you draft the laws for the year. Can you imagine that?
That'd be chaos. Yeah.
It's only allowed up to 2,000 people. But if you incorporate it, 1,900 people and get to 3,000, you're allowed to keep that form of government. Couldn't imagine 3,000 people arguing about the laws for a year, but nobody does that. But it's still it's an option that's allowed by code. You know what I mean? But yeah, they're not gonna unincorporate you because you lost a bunch of population.
And then did you say that you guys are gonna put out like a survey?
Yeah,
Okay, so just for your own, like right now, the season, this is the time. Because wait till January and we're all in the middle of busy season and we're like,
yeah.
you know, business to go and people everywhere, blah, blah, like. People are gonna survey it, I'll deal with it later, but like right now, everybody's like, what do you do?
Right.
No.
Yeah, thanks for the input.
Yeah,